In the 1980s, a 30-foot sailboat cost less than a new car, and it changed hands on word of mouth alone. Today, manufacturers barely acknowledge that perfect size existed, even though it was big enough to cross oceans and small enough to sail solo. The reason for its disappearance isn't progress or comfort, it is profit. Builders realized a 40-foot boat adds just 500 hours of labor, yet brings in 20 times the margin. The implications for ordinary sailors are massive, reshaping the freedom and even the safety of everyone who dreams of casting off. So why did the industry abandon the boat that worked for everyone? The answer: rewrites everything you think you know about sailing's so-called evolution. By the late 1970s, the 30-foot sailboat wasn't just popular, it was everywhere. Dealers couldn't keep up with demand. The Catalina 30, launched in 1974, became the world's best-selling cruising sailboat, with over 6,500 built in its first 2 decades. Pearson, Hunter, O'Day, every brand had their own version, and they moved fast. At one point, the waiting list for a new Catalina stretched months, and used boats sometimes sold for more than new, just because you could get one right away. Affordability drove this boom. In 1980, a brand new 30-footer cost between $30,000 and $40,000. That's about $110,000 to $120,000 in today's dollars, less than the average new car now. Teachers and postal workers could buy a boat on a summer wage, and families pooled savings to chase the dream of freedom afloat. The median U.S. household income in 1980 was $16,400. Yet a 30-footer was within reach for anyone willing to save up or stretch a little. No slick national ad campaigns fueled this surge. Boats sold by word of mouth, by dockside stories, by seeing your neighbor out on the bay. The numbers tell the story: dozens of models, thousands of boats launched every year, and marinas packed with 30-footers owned by people who never thought of themselves as yacht owners. For a generation, sailing was not just for the wealthy. It was accessible, practical, and real. A 30-foot sailboat was built for real hands, not just for show. Every control was within reach. If you needed to reef the main, you could stand in the cockpit and grab the boom without teetering on a step stool or crawling up on deck. The tiller meant you felt the water's pressure in your palm. No hydraulic lag, no guessing. When the wind piped up, you eased the sheet by hand. If a winch jammed, it was a nuisance, not a crisis. You could muscle the line free, curse, and carry on. That was human-scale sailing. On a boat like the Tartan 30 or the Catalina 30, nothing required a bodybuilder's grip or a team of helpers. The anchor could be raised by one person. The sails could be hoisted and trimmed by anyone with a decent back and a bit of patience. There was a reason single-handers loved these boats. You could manage every system alone, even after 60, even with a bad shoulder. You could still be in control. I have sailed plenty of bigger yachts, where a broken electric winch means you are stuck or at risk. On my own 32-foot boat, I know that if something fails, I can sort it out myself. That is not nostalgia, that is independence. These boats were not just smaller. They were designed to match the limits and strengths of the people who sailed them. You did not need a crew or a manual thicker than the phone book. You needed common sense, and maybe a little stubbornness. That was the promise of human-scale sailing. Step onto a factory floor in the 1980s, and you would find a line of 30-foot hulls, each one taking about 2,000 hours of skilled labor to finish. That meant crews spent weeks laying up fiberglass by hand, fitting bulkheads, and installing hardware. No shortcuts, no robots. But here is the number that changed everything. Building a 40-foot boat takes only about 2,500 hours. Just 25% more time, but the finished boat sells for nearly triple the price. A retired Catalina foreman once put it bluntly: it was the same crew, the same tools, just a few more sheets of plywood. The engine in a 30-foot boat and a 40-foot boat are nearly identical. The deck gear, the plumbing, even the wiring, costs barely move. What jumps is the sticker on the finished boat. In the 1990s, a new 30-foot boat might clear the builder $5,000 in profit. The 40-foot boat rolling out of the same shed could net $100,000 or more. The spreadsheet tells the real story. Hull resin is cheap, labor is not. When the price of materials and hours barely climbs, but the sales price soars, the math becomes impossible to ignore. If you are the one running the numbers, why make 3 small boats for the same profit as one big one? The answer, for most builders, was simple. You do not. Margins on 30-foot boats were always razor thin. By the early 2000s, those margins were squeezed even tighter by rising wages and insurance. Meanwhile, buyers with deeper pockets were lining up for the bigger models. The result was stark. The 30-foot boats vanished from production lines, not because sailors stopped wanting them, but because the profit was too small to keep the lights on. In the end, the spreadsheet won, and the working sailor lost. By the early 2000s, the entire game changed. Financial firms and outside investors started circling the boatyards, looking for ways to squeeze more value from every hull. They were not sailors, they were spreadsheet men chasing return on invested capital. For them, a 30-foot boat was a rounding error, not a product. The new playbook was simple: focus on models that delivered the highest margins, even if that meant pushing buyers into boats they did not really want or need. Brokerage followed suit. The commission structure, always a flat percentage, suddenly paid out far more on bigger boats. A broker selling a $150,000 30-foot boat pocketed $15,000. Move up to a $500,000 45-foot boat, and the same deal meant a $50,000 payday. The incentive was baked in. Brokers started steering clients toward larger models, using buzzwords like comfort and future-proofing to sweeten the upsell. One veteran broker put it this way: "I would rather sell one 45-foot boat than 3 30-footers. Less paperwork, more money, and the buyer thinks he is moving up in the world." Model lineups shifted overnight. Where catalogs once featured a full spread of 28-foot, 30-foot, and 32-foot models, suddenly the smallest cruiser on offer was 36 feet. The 30-footers were quietly dropped, replaced by longer hulls packed with features that looked good in glossy brochures and justified a much higher price tag. The story at the boat shows change too. Salesmen stood beside 40-foot boats talking about safety at sea, family comfort, and resale value. The real reason was written in the profit margins, not in the owner's manual. Outside capital did not just want steady sales, it wanted growth. That meant selling bigger boats to fewer people at higher prices and making sure the brokers, the dealers, and the marinas all got a cut. The 30-foot boat, once the heart of the sailing world, became a casualty of a system designed to reward size over sense. A naval rigger stands on a dock, eyes fixed on the dynamometer clipped to a 30-foot sloop mainsheet. He hauls the line, sweat beading on his brow. The readout climbs to 180 pounds, then to 210. That is the force needed to trim the sail in a stiff breeze on a classic 30-foot boat. He nods. Most people, even in their 60s, can manage that for a few seconds. It is hard, but not impossible. Human scale. He steps over to a 45-foot cruiser rigged the same way. The sheet is thicker, the winch bigger, but the principle is the same. He pulls. The meter surges past 600 pounds, then settles at 650. He grins and shakes his head. No one can hand trim that. Not a lifelong sailor, not a gym regular, not anyone who is not a machine. Physics. The numbers do not lie. On a 30-foot boat, the peak sheet load in a squall is something you can fight. On a 45, it triples. The winch does the work, or you do not sail. If the electric system fails, the sail becomes a wall of force you cannot budge. Sail area grows with the square of the boat length. A 30-foot boat might carry 400 square feet of main. A 45-footer may carry nearly 900. The loads do not just rise, they explode. Loads. Most sailors over 60 can sustain a pull of 40 to 60 pounds for half a minute. That is enough to crank in a 30-foot sheet by hand, maybe with some grunting and a pause to catch your breath. A 650-pound load is roughly 4 times the world record for a single arm pull. No amount of experience or determination changes that. The rigger points to the numbers, then to his calloused hands. On a small boat, strength and skill are enough. On a big boat, you are at the mercy of your gear. Control. This is the reality hidden behind glossy brochures and sales pitches. The jump from 30 to 45 feet is not just a few extra feet of comfort. It is a leap into a world where every system must work, every time. Because if a system does not work, you are not just inconvenienced, you are stuck, or worse. The dynamometer does not care about dreams or marketing, it only tells the truth. The bigger the boat, the bigger the risk when something breaks. Truth. A squall does not care how many gadgets you have. I have delivered everything from 28-footers to 55-foot floating condos, and the moment that sticks with me did not happen on a sunny day. It was a fast-moving front off the Chesapeake, on a 45-foot production cruiser. The forecast called for 18 knots, but the sky went black and the wind hit 35 knots in seconds. That is when you find out what you are really sailing. On a boat that size, every system has to work. The mainsail was out, full and powerful, and the autopilot was steering while I checked the radar. Then the autopilot alarm sounded, a high-pitched shriek, and the wheel started spinning hard to port. The electric winch for the main sheet was already running hot from the last reef. I lunged for the control, but the breaker tripped. The sail snapped and flogged, the boom swinging with a force I could not stop. The generator, which powered everything, was already near its limit, running the fridge and the water maker. When it cut out, I lost the chart plotter too. Suddenly, I was alone with a wall of canvas and a boat that would not answer the helm. There is a chain reaction when systems fail on a big boat. If the electric winch jams, the sheet load spikes. The sail starts flogging, multiplying the forces until the hardware or the line gives out. If you are 65 and alone, you cannot muscle a 650-pound load, not even close. You cannot drop the main by hand. You cannot steer with a wheel that is fighting you with thousands of pounds of pressure. You are at the mercy of the machines, and when they quit, you are just a passenger. On a 30-footer, the same squall is a different story. The loads are tough, but you can release the sheet by hand. You can round up, let the boat settle, and ride it out. The anchor, the sails, the steering are all within human reach. Independence is not just a feeling. It is the difference between handling a problem and watching it spiral. The bigger the boat, the more you rely on systems that can and do fail. The 30-footer keeps sailing when the electronics go dark. That is not nostalgia, that is survival. Some boats outlast trends and profit margins by the simple force of how well they were built. The Westsail 32, for example, was never a mass market darling, yet thousands survived because nothing on board was rushed. Every hull was laid up by hand, layer after layer of thick fiberglass, with a solid lead keel bedded in place by men who measured their work in weeks, not hours. Owners talk about crossing to Bermuda at age 62, the boat tracking straight as a tug through squalls that sent lighter yachts running for cover. Try to build that same boat today, and you would be staring at a $450,000 invoice just for the labor. The Fisher 34 is another survivor. British built, with a pilot house that lets you steer in a gale without getting soaked, it was framed in heavy steel and finished in real teak. Owners tell stories of sailing on when the marinas emptied, the boat shrugging off North Sea weather that would sideline a modern Beneteau. You can find one now for less than a new family sedan, but to reproduce the joinery and glasswork would cost $500,000. The Pacific Seacraft 34 rounds out this rebel trio. Designed for blue water, it is a double-ender with chain plates anchored deep into the hull and an interior that feels carved, not assembled. One owner, well into his 70s, sailed solo across the Atlantic relying on systems he could fix himself, with spares that fit in a backpack. Custom interiors, hand-finished lockers, every detail built for a lifetime afloat. In 2026, no yard will quote a new one for less than $500,000, and none will match the original craftsmanship. These boats were not just built, they were overbuilt. And that is why they are still out there, proving the industry wrong. A brand new 40-foot cruiser today lists around $400,000 before you even start adding options. By the time you have signed the paperwork and paid for electronics, sales, and the usual yard fees, you are staring down $500,000, and that is if you do not get hit with a surprise upcharge. Now compare that to the cost of bringing a classic 30 to 34-foot boat back to life. I have seen full refit invoices for boats in this range, haul out, new rigging, sales, electronics, engine, even a fresh interior. The total is about $80,000, sometimes less if you are handy or shop smart. That is not pocket change, but it is a fifth the price of a new 40-foot boat, and you end up with a boat that is proven, simple, and still has decades of life left. Depreciation is the silent killer in the new boat game. That $400,000 cruiser loses 10 to 20% of its value the moment it leaves the yard, $40,000 gone before you have even left the slip. 5 years in, half your investment has vanished. Meanwhile, a well-refitted legacy boat holds its value, or even appreciates if the work has been done right. Owners who choose the refit route are not just saving money, they are sidestepping the slow bleed of depreciation. They are putting their budget into hardware and reliability, not into lining someone else's pockets. For those who want to sail, not speculate, the numbers speak for themselves. Today, a new 30-foot boat costs more than most homes, and marina slips are shrinking as luxury yachts dominate the docks. Yet the principles of manageable, human-scale sailing remain unchanged. As complexity and cost escalate, true independence is harder to buy, but never less valuable. The sea won't care what you own. It will always reward those who choose control over excess. What size freedom are you willing to fight for?